Ladies and gentlemen, in this speech, I intend to discuss values and norms governing our life. Not necessarily the rules we declare to be good, but the rules we actually obey in practice. I submit to you that our most fundamental rules are encoded in our genes. If we were inclined to harm others more than to care for them, we would simply not have survived as a social species. The most obvious example is the love and care for children and kin. Because they share our genes, this drives the primary force of evolution. Evolutionary theory provides the framework to understand how behaviors, including caring for others beyond our kin, emerge and are favored by natural selection. Two key concepts illustrate this. Reciprocal altruism. This is the understanding that individuals help non-relatives with the expectation that the help will be returned. This behavior is observable in social primates and is foundational to human commerce and interaction. Empathy. Humans evolved the capacity for empathy, allowing us to resonate with the emotions of others almost physically. However, this mechanism has limits. It is most effective when we can connect with specific, visible suffering. Seeing a report on a single child who has been harmed is more likely to spur us to action than statistical data regarding the slaughter of thousands in a distant country. This bias exists because, for thousands of years, caring for others was only critical within the small tribe we lived in. A powerful force, particularly regarding males, is sexual selection and status. High status in a hierarchy is associated with power. Regardless of our humble declarations, we value power and often fight ferociously for it. Yet, there are rules governing this fight. We instinctively despise those who gain power by cheating or arbitrary appointment. Conversely, we respect those who gain it through creativity, charisma, and competence. The way people curate their lives on social media, exposing only status-boosting successes, is symptomatic of this deep-seated need for appreciation and rank. As Robert Cialdini eloquently explains in his famous book Influence, we crave to be likable, and even a mere association with a celebrity, due to the fact that we attended the same school in the past, seems to be worth bragging even if we have nothing to do with their successes. This is probably why likes have made such a career in social media. I am not free from this force, so if you think this material is valuable and aligns with my goal of incentivizing thought about important matters, please give me a like, even if you do not agree with me. As a social species, we are conformists, adjusting to the crowd. This is why, for example, during sporting events, many take outrageous actions they would never do alone. We are also prone to obey authority or anyone with high status in a certain area. That is why we trust a doctor, even without arguments advocating for the specific recommendations we receive. This conformity also has dark sides, as marvelously shown in Christopher Browning's book, Ordinary Men. We are able to overcome the natural disgust stemming from empathy and engage in murderous actions if that is the course of action of the majority of the group. This is often driven by a primal need not to be excluded from the group and to satisfy the craving for acceptance and belonging, which evolution has embedded in our nature. Throughout human history, individuals who conform to group norms often enjoyed a survival advantage. Banding together in groups provided security against predators and increased the chances of successful hunting and gathering. Conforming to group behaviors and shared values facilitated cooperative strategies, which were crucial for survival in early human societies. Moreover, much of our learning occurs through imitation and social interaction. Evolution favored those who could learn from others by observing their behaviors and adopting successful strategies. This social learning can manifest as conformism, where individuals adopt the behaviors or beliefs of their peers. Evolution also favored behaviors that enhance group cohesion. Conformity helps maintain social bonds and a sense of belonging, which can be critical for cooperative survival. This can lead to in-group favoritism, promoting social cohesion among those who conform while potentially leading to hostility toward those who don't fit in. Of course, the darker aspects of our nature are also products of evolution. These negative impulses are often activated to combat members of other groups. Historically, anyone outside one's group represented a deadly threat. However, we possess great flexibility in defining who belongs to our group. It can be a religious denomination or a nation, a somewhat surprising flexibility, considering the concept of the nation-state only truly solidified in the 18th century. Yet millions have since been slaughtered in its name. This instinctive affiliation with in-groups explains why diversity initiatives so frequently bring bad results. Evolutionary history has primed humans to prioritize trust with those who are familiar. In environments like schools, despite a mix of nationalities, individuals often naturally coalesce with representatives of their own background. In such cases, artificially diversified environments can inadvertently magnify existing stereotypes rather than minimize them. While there are functionally dysfunctional individuals, murderers, or those with sadistic inclinations, they remain a small statistical margin. Otherwise, society would cease to exist. However, genes do not entirely determine our rules. Culture plays a vital role. We see how culture molds morality most explicitly in the tremendous moral progress experienced in the Western world over the last 250 years. The source of this progress is the Enlightenment, a pivotal turning point emphasizing reason, individualism, and a scientific approach. The most important rule of this era is rationality, relying on evidence-based claims rather than dogma found in holy books. After centuries of stagnation following the fall of the Roman Empire, progress reignited during the Renaissance and accelerated during the Enlightenment. The application of evidence-based thinking performed secular miracles. Consider the data. While the global population exploded from 1 billion to over 8 billion, we have successfully lifted nearly 90% of that population out of extreme poverty and eliminated hunger in similar proportions. We have increased global literacy from roughly 12% in 1820 to nearly 87% today. We have transformed autocratic feudalism into liberal democracies that guarantee individual rights previously unimaginable. It is worth noting that major religions were often in opposition to these ideas. The scientific method, which allows for the challenging of every claim, stood in stark opposition to truths given once and for all by religious authorities. We are all familiar with the persecution of Galileo and the fierce opposition to heliocentrism and evolution. The Catholic Church's Index Librorum Prohibitorum banned works by Enlightenment giants like Descartes and Voltaire because they threatened theological foundations with secular rationalism. The Enlightenment also birthed the crucial idea of meritocracy. Meritocracy suggests that individuals should succeed based on ability and effort rather than bloodline. Ideally, it ensures equality of opportunity, where rewards are determined by achievement. From an evolutionary perspective, nepotism is like sugar. Evolution compelled humans to crave sugar because it was a scarce resource. Today, in a time of abundance, that craving causes health crises. Similarly, the instinct to favor one's kin is deeply embedded. But in a modern, complex society, handing a position of responsibility to an influential friend's child rather than the best qualified candidate is toxic to the social body. The free market is also a child of the Enlightenment. Thinkers like Adam Smith and David Hume articulated that when individuals pursue their own interests through voluntary exchange, they inadvertently promote societal welfare, the famous invisible hand. The free market validates the Enlightenment ideal of personal autonomy, empowering individuals to make choices about production and consumption, driving innovation through competition. I realize some may be critical of including economics in a speech on values. However, when properly implemented, the free market's contribution to human well-being is so immense that it inevitably alters the moral landscape. Similarly, enormous progress in our moral landscape resulted from the Enlightenment's concepts of the rule of law, checks and balances, freedom of speech and belief, and the revolution of the legal system through the introduction of mechanisms guaranteeing individual rights, such as the right to defense, the right to appeal, and collegial decision-making in important matters. Individuals cease to be powerless against rulers, having acquired the tools to defend their rights. These ideas are far more important than democracy understood merely as decision-making by the majority, as democracy alone often tends to transform into a tyranny of the majority, as was seen in Nazi Germany. Finally, the Enlightenment catalyzed moral progress regarding racism, misogyny, and the treatment of the vulnerable. Early thinkers began to challenge the notion of inherent racial superiority. Similarly, misogyny was critically examined. Advancements in genetic science have helped dismantle the biological basis of bigotry, revealing that all humans share an overwhelmingly common genetic heritage. However, we must remain rational. Science indicates that while we are equal in dignity, we are not biologically identical. For example, while the average man possesses greater grip strength than the average woman, there is significant overlap. There are female athletes who can surpass 99% of men in strength. However, denying that biological trends exist, as some modern ideologies tend to do, is catastrophically wrong and risks discrediting the very movement for equality it seeks to support. We have also seen a revolution in the treatment of children and animals. The Enlightenment shifted the view of childhood from a time of strict discipline to a protected stage of development. Simultaneously, philosophers like Jeremy Bentham argued that a being's capacity to suffer, not just their capacity to reason, demands moral consideration, laying the groundwork for animal welfare. Perhaps the most radical moral evolution is happening now within our criminal justice system, driven by neuroscience. The Enlightenment philosopher Cesare Beccaria argued for the end of draconian punishment, but modern science is taking this a step further by questioning the very concept of blame. We must grapple with the growing body of evidence suggesting that free will is largely an illusion, which means dramatic shift in moral judgments, not only for the criminal justice system, but perhaps most symptomatic in this area. In the 1980s, the neurophysiologist Benjamin Libet conducted a groundbreaking experiment. He asked participants to flex their wrists whenever they felt the urge. By monitoring their brain activity, Libet discovered that a specific electrical signal, the readiness potential, fired in the brain roughly 350 milliseconds before the subject was even consciously aware of their decision to move. More recently, in 2008, John Dylan Haynes at the Bernstein Center for Computational Neuroscience used fMRI scanners to predict a subject's decision up to 7 seconds before the subject themselves knew what they were going to do. What does this mean for morality? It implies that the choice to commit a crime may be the result of neural firings determined by genetics, brain chemistry, and past trauma, processes completely outside the conscious control of the perpetrator. As Stanford neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky argues, we are biological machines. When the brakes on a car fail, we do not blame the car. We fix it or we park it where it cannot cause harm. Consequently, we should treat criminals not as evil souls, but as broken machinery. They must be excluded from society if they pose a danger. But this exclusion should be based on public safety, not retribution. This shift has already begun. Countries that prioritize rehabilitation over punishment, like Norway, experience significantly lower recidivism rates. This is important, is discussion about morality, as despite the religious emphasis on forgiveness, a desire for retribution was the true driver of our actions. It is symptomatic how religious denominations correlate with all the progress I presented earlier. Protestant denominations, which historically incentivized literacy, to read the Bible, and individual interpretation, incorporated Enlightenment values faster than the hierarchical Catholic Church. This correlation is visible in the developmental success of those nations. Today, Western countries permeated by these values are the destinations where the rest of the world wishes to move, voting for Enlightenment-born freedom and affluence with their feet. In conclusion, principles governing social life are dual in nature. They are partially embedded in our genes, universal and ancient, yet also dynamic, molded by culture and intellect. The Enlightenment initiated a wave of moral progress that lifted humanity out of the mud. Contrary to what many declare, the rules that actually govern successful contemporary societies are based on these rational ideas, rather than holy books and dogmas of the past. I believe that the principles of the Enlightenment represent the only truly universal values for all humanity, standing in stark contrast to religions and ideologies that divide people into smaller, antagonistic groups. We can conclude on a positive note by recalling that no nation cast a vote against the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Thank you.